Welcome to Unbiased and On the Fence. I'm Shane. This is Paranormal Frequencies, and we got a great guest tonight, SMQ AI. Welcome to the broadcast. Whoops. Let me, sorry, you were muted. I'm horrible with that damn mute button. Okay. SMQ AI, welcome to the broadcast.
Oh, thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
No problem. Sherry, why don't you intro our guest?
Okay, first I wanted to show y'all something though. So I came prepared. Okay, I can't read with this on though.
It's cool.
Okay.
We're like agents. I like it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's cool, you know? Okay. SMQ is a researcher in both the Mandela effect and the paranormal. His experiences with both have led him to believe that the two are not mutually exclusive and indeed are part of the same phenomena. His work has brought him to a re-understanding such as the events of World War II and question why there is a moon museum on the moon. Recently, he's obtained a series of CIA FOIA requests that have him relearning the nature of existence. He has a YouTube channel called SMQ AI and a Sunday show called The Lizard Ritual on Truth Frequency Radio. So here he is. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, and awesome. I do have SMQAI's links below, so if you haven't subscribed, you can head on over and do that. And okay, so we got a lot to cover, man. This document alone is like tremendous, but I definitely want to talk to you about the Mandela effect because
Well, I just want to say really quick, the reason I picked him to come on was because, okay, I had, you know, being interested in the Mandela effect. I'm not going to lie to you, SMQ, like, I kind of pushed off the died in 2012 thing. And then one night I was like bored and I'm like, I'm going to listen to this. And I listened to the Higher Side Chat show with Greg Carlwood.
Yes.
And it was awesome. It was so good. And I was like, this is really a neat theory, you know? And then I started looking at your channel and then I was like, oh my gosh, you know, the Monroe Institute and Gateway came up and like, that's what I do. You know, that is like me. I'm all about it. So I thought this would be interesting. We could kind of find out about each other.
No, that's wonderful. And just the fact that you have these kinds of synchronicities is sort of the kind of life that I've been leading for the last 2 years since the Mandela effect has kind of, you know, taken over all parts of my life and all parts of my understanding of my existence and my relationship with this reality. So just the fact that you came across those kinds of ways and that sort of serendipitous way is, you know, I get that more and more now in this life. And oftentimes I have no control or no idea what's going on when it comes to things like this. So yeah, that's great. That's wonderful.
There was a book that came out in the 90s called The Celestine Prophecies that talks about all these synchronistic things happening in this way. You know, did you ever hear that book? I think
I've
you would
heard.
really enjoy it.
Yeah, I didn't read the book, but yeah, I've heard of it.
Yeah, there's actually a YouTube audio book. It's like 9 hours long, and you can finish it like overnight if you put it on double time.
Oh, awesome.
Yeah, it's riveting. It's like, wow, this is awesome. The movies, you know, a lot of people say the movie's real good, and I like the movie, but nothing like the book, man. The book was, and the audio book that you can listen to for free is awesome. So I always tell people about that one because even if you read it in the 90s, I think it just applies more today than ever.
Oh,
Okay.
wonderful.
One of my questions was, I was wondering if you still subscribe to that we died in 2012 thing, or if it was just a theory, you know, or if that's what you believe happened.
Well, you know, what I think about it now is What was happening at the time was I was just discovering the Mandela effect, and it was really my first set of videos that I ever, that I ever did on it. And that was back in early 2017 when I started the channel. And I was just trying to make sense of the Mandela effect and kind of intake all the information that was out there at the time. I think, like I brought up on THC, there was one video that really got to me, and there was a gentleman that was talking about the Lindbergh baby, and one that was a big Mandela effect at the time, was whether or not the Lindbergh baby, what do you remember? And I had, in my reality, I'd always remembered that the Lin the Lindbergh baby was never found. It was always a mystery, and then come to find out that that wasn't the case in this version of reality. And I don't remember the sequence that he brought us to this, but he said, "I think we're dead. We died. We're in the afterlife." And I thought that was incredibly frightening and incredibly interesting. And I think that his video is actually still up. You can still get it, and it has the Lindbergh baby on the thumbnail. But right after that, I already knew about Time Wave Zero with Terrence McKenna and his the end of time with his calculation for 2012. And then two, there was a series of other, like, I'd heard like bits of 4chan chatter talking about reality was a server, and it was like the Matrix movie. And I was just hearing all these different disparate things, and I decided to do the 2012 series, and We Died in 2012. And I didn't when I first started it, there was a lot of people thought that I had, maliciousness, or there was some kind of like a psyop or something going on, and it wasn't. It was just me. First off, I didn't have an audience like I have now, which is still small, just over 6,000 people in comparison to some, channels that have much, much bigger audiences. And but at the time, I had, maybe 200 people at the most, and most of them were friends that I knew from Twitter. Or so I didn't expect much to come of the 2012 We Died in 2012 series. And then obviously the second video exploded. And well, for a channel my size, even now, 170,000 plus views is a lot for, a channel even my size today. If I get, I normally get around 1,000 views now, but if I get 3 or 4,000 views, I'm very happy. So I still
I
have
think my
yet.
top one has 150,000. So I mean, that's awesome that you hit that kind of number. You know.
Right, so you get, the magnitude of, and now imagine this was your second video ever, and you had less than 300, let's call it, subs,
Yeah.
and most of them were the folks you were talking to on Twitter. So I had no idea how this took off. To this day, I still don't know. I don't understand what happened, but I ended up developing this sort of internal philosophy around We Died in 2012. And at the time, I was really confused and didn't understand the Mandela effect, and it was very frightening to me. And I decided to just kind of write down and go with some of the ideas that would pop in my head, and it kind of became this thing. And eventually, I think it was negatively impacting a very, very small group of people, but I don't think they were trolls, and I believed them. And I decided to be cautious and stop the series. And so now I still have it on the playlist, and I try to reference it every now and then. It's kind of a nod to that. But even the last time I did that, I think that's one of the reasons why I was demonetized. So I don't even bring it up anymore, because I'm afraid of what YouTube may do to the channel next.
Well, and I think a lot of people are just scared. It's kind of scary. That's just a scary thing to think of, you know.
Mm.
But there's
Hmm.
so many different theories about it, out there, so that aren't they're also scary,
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
Yeah, there is a lot of scary theories out there, but how do you feel now that it's been a while? You've had, I mean, clearly it's like, I mean, sure, maybe we would redefine what death even is at this point. I think most of us had to go back to the drawing board with the whole Mandela effect because it just didn't fit in with how we knew reality worked.
Mhm.
So, and which gets us to this document we're going to discuss. But I mean, how do you feel about it now? Do you feel like it's some sort of natural phenomenon happening, or do you feel like it's what do you feel? Think it's caused?
I feel a little bit vindicated because even though I've kind of walked back the whole "we died in 2012" thing, and I've kind of relegated it to somewhat of a thought exercise. Since reading the CIA FOIA request, I've kind of come to the conclusion that I'm still learning, and that I don't understand life or reality or how it's constructed. Um, and that there are agencies like the DoD or the CIA or the Department of the Army that indeed are much farther along in its understanding, and that it puts out documents. There's no conspiracy with this document. It's out there. They've used it before. It's a 35-year-old document explaining reality and existence, and and explaining the nature of time. And I went on for more than a year without knowing this document existed or the Monroe Institute existing, and coming to find out a lot of the things that I was feeling, a lot of the things that I was writing down and trying to understand, and from reading occult books or alternative thinking books, and taking all of those things and with different kinds of videos, I feel a bit vindicated in that kind of thinking and saying that perhaps life and or death, and certainly the linear concept of time is completely, up for grabs at this point. So that's how I feel about it.
I think if anybody uh, will admit, take an objective look at it, and they've really sort of tried to be objective with this whole thing. I thought about it. I mean, that's one of the main things that came to my mind at first. Like, man, did I die or something? Because when you see
Hmm.
reality change in an impossible way, like if you look at that JFK car and see six people, and there were four in it, and it was a black and white film, and you're like looking at all this, and it feels like you're in a completely different reality, a different, just an alternate universe. It just flips with your mind. So there's no way you don't look in the mirror and say, did I die? What the heck's going on
Hmm.
here? So it crossed my mind too early on. And then I thought, well, I'm going to have to really go back to the drawing board on so many things that I thought worked a certain way, because it's just things happen in an impossible way with the way most people think. If you're just like, the average everyday person, you know what I mean? So
Hmm.
there's no way that doesn't cross your mind. And then that document you were talking about, or that the leaker on 4chan, I came across that. I can't really remember what it is now, but I found some holes in that story back then. Both of them. There was two different ones. One was sort of like there was a server. The world was really, I think, Night Terrors channel is the one I first heard about it, and then I looked into 4chan. But it was like the server went down. We were like offloaded onto this other server, and our world was really destroyed in a nuclear holocaust, and that
Hmm.
the servers are about to break down, and we'll revert back to the other timeline and all. And I considered all that, but there was a couple of problems with it, and I can't really think of it now because it was really early on. And there was also another whistleblower on there that said
Hmm.
that they, I think at CERN, they were one of 23 CERN scientists or something like that. There was another. Did you see that one that came out around that same time?
I don't remember. I remember the one they were talking about the servers, and I'm trying. I don't remember CERN in that one, so maybe it was the
Okay.
second. Okay,
Yeah, the
I
CERN was the other one then. Yeah.
okay. I've always been suspicious of whether or not CERN was part of this whole, even today,
Yeah. Oh,
whether it's
yeah.
part of the Mandela effect. I mean, obviously, it's a great suspect,
Yeah.
but I'm still sticking with the concept and the possibility that the Mandela effect is something natural. It could
Yeah.
be natural. It's either naturally occurring or, according to the CIA document, reality is indeed a hologram, and we've been broken off like a node on the blockchain. Is so it's two extremes to me, and neither one have much to do with CERN.
Well,
Exactly. Yeah. I've kind of.
before you get into that, I wanted to get him to tell SMQ to tell you about. There's this guy that the ancient agent Asian that found out some crazy changes to history that a lot of us don't know about. And I was gonna, I mean, you can finish what you're talking about, but I didn't want him to forget to say that before we moved on to the document.
Okay. What I was going to say about the other whistleblower really fast was that there was a lot of parallels with Revelations when you looked into that. Like they said, there was one of 23. They were clones designed to control reality, and it went alongside what there's 24 elders and Revelations that's doing these things, you know. And it was like after a while of looking at it and dissecting it and understanding the Bible real well, you could see how the person sort of designed this scenario that they leaked, supposedly leaked, with trying to make it like this biblical thing that was going on. So I kind
Mm,
of discounted that because a lot of things didn't line up with that either. So that's really the only thing I wanted to say about the other one that went sort of along with the server crash leaker.
mhm.
So there was two different theories that kind of came out that I had looked into early on in 2017, and
Okay.
so yeah, that it's a waste of time in my opinion, and the whole CERN thing I think is a waste of time because what are you going to do with it anyway? You know, I know that they're up to something there. Don't get me wrong, but I don't think they're causing the Mandela effect. You know.
Yeah, and the thing about it is, if you know, from everything that we've studied with the Mandela effect and everything that you read inside these particular set of documents, particularly the main document, and then they have subsequent documents that the CIA has put out. Yeah, time is not at all what we think. It's not linear whatsoever.
Mm-hmm.
And the people can traverse time in terms of it not being linear. So there could be the idea of it being altered seems relatively easy with the more advanced Focus 21 and plus groups that are outside of what you know. It starts in the Monroe Institute, but that's 35 years ago. That's the starting point. And given the almost unlimited budget and the 35 years of study, I'm almost at the point to believing that the reason why this document was actually released to us was so that we would read it, particularly this population, as in MEs, the paranormal, the occult, anybody, conspiracy folks, anybody that is on the vanguard of fringe thinking would get a hold of this this document. And the reason why we need to read the document is the way I was describing it before is, and the way the document puts it, it talks about this thing called patterning. And it says here, if are you okay if I read a line from it?
Oh yeah, sure.
Is that
Uh, what
cool?
um what page are you on? I can pull it up here for everybody
Sure.
else to.
Yeah, it's page 20 and section B. It's called patterning.
This link is in the description, by the way, you guys. If you want to go pull this up for yourself, the CIA document. Okay, 20. Oh, page 20 or section 20? Let's see, page
It's
20.
page 20. Well, it's after page 19. I think it's page 20, but it's kind of covered up by the CIA stamp. They have that stamp with the serial number
Oh
on it.
yeah.
Yeah. So if you go to page
Oh,
19,
B
yeah,
patterning. I see it here.
yep, patterning. Yep. Yeah, okay. It's sort of at the bottom here, just before color breathing. It
Mm-hmm.
says here, in other words, the techniques of patterning recognizes the fact that since consciousness is the source of all reality, our thoughts have the power to influence the development of reality in time-space as it applies to us if those thoughts can be projected with adequate intensity. However, the more complicated the objective sought, the more radically it departs from our current reality, the more time the universal hologram will need to reorient our reality sphere to accommodate our desires. And then it says here, more importantly, to what we're talking about, Monroe trainers caution against attempting to force the pace of this process because the individual could succeed in dislocating his existing reality with drastic consequences. And there's
Wow.
another, right. So inside just these three or four sentences, it tells you the nature of reality. It tells you what they're doing with the nature of that reality. And it also tells you with those who dare um, tinker with the nature of reality. And what can happen is um, you can indeed become dislodged from your reality or your body or whatever it is, how whatever context you want to put it into. And it sounds to me, if you really read this over and over again, it can be done And it sounds to me, if you read this, they have to have a kind of consensus on what they're going to do with reality. And that's what this patterning is talking about. And they have to have it because it says here that we have the power to influence the development of reality. But if we're going to do that, it's got to be something that isn't very complicated and sort of close to this version of reality. So if you think about it on a mass scale, they have this thing called the Overton window. And what the Overton window is in sociology and psychology, it's this window of acceptable speech and behavior. And at one end is, desired speech, desired behavior. At the tail end of it is speech that's not desired and not acceptable. And then if you go outside the window, it's unacceptable behavior. Now, if you apply this to what they're talking about in patterning, they're doing the same thing. They need to have the population within the Overton window spiritually. So they have, there's us, well, there's them. They're on the vanguard of the Overton window, and they're the ones pushing it forward. They're pushing the Overton window this way.
Mm-hmm.
There's us, our population, like MEs, like I am, people who are paranormal, that they have the paranormal in their life, the occult, things like that. And then there's the mainstream folks, and they're at the very end of the Overton window, let's say. And what they're having to do is move that window. And in order to move that window, it's a trickle down experience that has to happen with the population. And the document is explaining that reality has to slowly be changed over time in order for all of this to work. And that's what patterning is all about. However, I do believe the way that they talk about fractals and the nature of these holograms and the individual consciousness, you too can be dislodged from your own body in a way that can drastically change your understanding of reality and disorient you. So there's a lot of things in here.
So, in your opinion, if somebody were to do that whole dislodge thing, do you think, from their point of view, they jumped into another timeline, and from other people around them, they just maybe changed a little bit, or a different version of them took their place, or do you see it as changing within this current reality? Do you have an opinion on that, or how you see it happening?
Yeah, well, it's kind of tough because I had this idea of different timelines, and the way I had visualized them had to drastically change once I read the document. Because after I read the document, I realized that the way in which I was visualizing timelines wasn't the way that the document was talking about it. The document sees timelines sort of as mirrored fractals, and each one of these mirrored fractals sort of, they mirror one another, and they do it in an infinite number of ways, so that each fractal is a little bit different from the next, and that, however, each part of that fractal maintains sort of this, well, I call it kind of the galactic ledger. It has sort of the balance of your checkbook. It has sort of inside of each one of these holographic fractals. Now,
Mm-hmm.
there's a potential of whatever consciousness that you have, I'm thinking perhaps they could move you from it, or they make it you more conscious of the particular fractal that you're in, perhaps, and that's what we experience. I'm still working that through after all this time because it's so complicated and it changed
Yeah.
so much, for
Well,
me.
one of the things I realized early on is that the timeline thing doesn't fit with so many. The way we traditionally think of timelines don't fit with some of the changes we see. Like you've got 18 softball girls with their fist to their forehead next to the thinker, and it's changed. I'm like, well, if we got out of this train and hopped into this train it would have always looked that way, and those versions of those girls next to it would have been mimicking it properly. But we see this like it looks like one reality that's been altered or hacked somehow. And the more we look into, because we do this thing on Saturday nights, this power of our intentions, and we can see these changes. I mean, there's real science behind the fact that when enough people direct their intentions towards something, a physical change could be made. And this sounds sort of like, it sounds like maybe they got this patterning that you're talking about. So a small change, like switching the way the letter looks in a logo, maybe it was a group of individuals saying, "Hey, let's see if we can merge these letters or something." It's a small change, and we just have to connect them a little bit. It's not too far off from, like what you were saying in the document. It's not too far off from what our current reality is, so it wouldn't be too hard to connect these letters or to switch. It's a beautiful day in this neighborhood, from the neighborhood, or something really small. It's just a letter or two difference.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I totally, and this document completely backs all of that up. I mean, if you're into, the power of positive thinking or the secret or anything related to that, this is an absolute vindication of those kinds of mind-centered, mind-oriented understandings of your reality. If you want, I can read another section that sort of backs up exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, let me go full. And what page are we at here?
It would be page 8, section 14. It's called the Consciousness Matrix.
Okay, 13, 14. Got it.
Okay. It says here the universe is composed of interacting energy fields, some at rest and some in motion. It is, in of itself, one gigantic hologram of unbelievable complexity, according to the theories of Carl Pribram, a neuroscientist at Stanford University, and David Bohm, a physicist at the University of London. The human mind is also a hologram, which attunes itself to the universal hologram by the medium of energy exchange, thereby deducing meaning and achieving the state which we call consciousness. So that's a pretty important bit of information that I always thought was, you
And
know.
that almost sounds like why we see sometimes we'll have dual memories of some of the Mandela effect changes.
Hmm.
It's like you're
Hmm.
tapping into this consciousness and you're tapping into this consciousness a little bit, and there's like, I guess, the matrix consciousness and then your individual consciousness. And
Hmm.
it's like that's why we're able to remember some of the changes because it's within our little fractal, right?
Hmm.
Hologram. And so we can remember how it used to be, but then we're seeing how it actually looks now, currently, and it's different than what we have saved on our own local memory, I guess you would say.
And that's what I'm thinking about, is that you have these different fractals inside reality, exactly what you're talking about. And I think that there has to be a balance at the end of the day in the ledger system, so to speak, with each one of these infinite fractals. But they talk about doing this, freezing the fractals and throwing them. And the point that, and I was trying to find it, the point is to freeze the fractal and then, like you would a bowl of water, and then throw it on the ground. And when you do it, what reality does is it breaks apart. And then each one of the shards of ice, so to speak, they
Mm-hmm.
have inside of it reflected, the entirety of the fractal that makes up reality in
Mm-hmm.
each one of the pieces. Now, the idea could be that you do that on purpose. You break it off. So you have a node or a shard that's all by itself, and they mention that it becomes kind of fuzzy inside of it, although it has the reflection in it. And I've always played with the idea of, what if they've done that and we're in, more or less, one of those pieces. Now that deviates from the timeline thing. However, it makes sense in terms of having a fuzzy reality that you can easily manipulate, because it's a it's kind of broken off from the rest of the universal hologram, and they even use the word fuzzy in it, and that obviously implies that things can come in and out of focus, so therefore you can manifest things easier, I would think so.
Yeah, and the thing is, I mean, you just mentioned this document. I guess, it was approved for release in 2003, but
Hmm.
it was 20 years from before that they
Hmm.
were looking at this stuff. So their research goes much further beyond that. And
Hmm.
Sherry, when you actually went to the Monroe Institute, the Gateway program was the ground floor, right? I think I have some. Actually, let me share this and let me move to this document. Let me share my screen so you can see
That's
this.
what I
It's
wanted to show you, SMQ.
Okay.
Okay, let me pull up the right thing here. Let me go full screen here.
Well, you're gonna have to skip through all those to get to it,
No,
right?
it's cool. We'll do our little. That's where you went, right? That's the Monroe
Yes,
Institute.
that's my favorite place in the world.
And that's Monroe when he was younger.
Yes, and I have a quick story about that. I'm gonna go back.
Okay.
In my first meditation that I did there, I was the only person that smoked at this place. And I
Mm-hmm.
was feeling awkward because everybody was like spiritual, you know, and I was like, they had an ashtray for me outside and all, but so I spoke in my first meditation. I saw this man, you know, in this oversized shouldered suit with this slick back hair, and he had a cigarette and he like kind of went cheers to me like this. And the next day when we were doing all this intro stuff, they showed this actual picture of him, and I was like, oh my God, Robert Monroe told me it's okay to smoke here. He made me more comfortable himself.
Oh, that's
That's wild.
great.
Yeah.
I
And that's
I yeah, that's totally I'm absolutely there's no doubt in my mind that's probably who you saw, no doubt.
Yep. And there he is as I remembered him, the next picture. And he is actually on what I call my council. I have a council of like kind of spirit guide people. You know, like my dad and Dolores Cannon, some other deceased people are in it. And
mm-hmm.
he is along with Edgar Casey. I just have their support
Yeah.
spiritually.
That's powerful. That's amazing. And I'm very familiar with the ARE Institute and Edgar Casey, and
I love
that's
Edgar. There is
that's
Yeah,
the
me
River is
too.
my favorite book, one of my favorite books. So Robert authored these three books, Journeys Out of the Body, Far Journeys, and Ultimate Journey. And you know, it was like my dream to go there. And I was actually working on a hospice case, and I'd contacted the Monroe Institute to get them to help my lady transition. And someone actually contacted me from that group and said they'd talked to Robert Monroe out of body, and that he'd said I would never pay for myself to go there because I always spend my money on my kids. And he paid for me to go there.
It's
And
like
so I got,
$2,500, right?
yes. And then my son was like, Mom, you didn't see the movie Hostel? And he called and gave him the third degree before he found out it was okay for me to go and everything. And I didn't really have any reservations about it, but my family did. And
Mm-hmm.
to this day, it's one of my favorite experiences I ever had. And I love the Monroe Institute. And I think the next one is the one I really wanted to show you. Gateway itself, that's like the preschool of this program. You ready?
oh
Okay, here we
Yeah,
go.
and that's the funny thing about this, because if it wasn't the beginning of
You can pass that one's about Hemisync. Go ahead.
now, just to say real quick, years ago I was all into hemisync. I had no idea about the Monroe Institute, but you know I was totally into these binaural beats and all of that. And this was like in the '90s that I was into that stuff. Okay,
Here we
so this is
go.
what we want to show here.
This one I'll show you. Okay, Gateway is the very first program, and it is like a prerequisite for the others. And then you can do like guidelines, heartlines, lifeline, MC squared, and timeline. Or you can go on to guidelines or lifeline, exploration 27, and then you move on to Starlines and Starlines 2, which is alien interaction.
Wow.
okay.
Now
Okay. So,
you'll find this really interesting.
This is
Yeah,
more.
so yeah, not to move too far beyond this, but I mean, if the Monroe Institute had gone this far beyond what we're looking at in this document, how far do you think the
Right.
CIA went? You know what I
real,
mean?
real quick, just to shout out the Monroe Institute, I also want to say that they have the other things down at the bottom. And Destination Higher Self and Out of Body Intensive is run by Mr. William Buhlman. He's one of my favorite authors. I met him there and he signed all my books. And I have great respect for William. I'm going to try to get him on the show. But anyway, okay, continue on.
Okay, so this is I think will help fill in some gaps on what you were looking at with because wasn't it Focus 12 that you were talking about
well,
listening to?
yeah, they have what they talk about towards the back when they're talking about clicking out, and they talk about a three-person formation for whomever or whatever they're targeting, because people immediately went to the TI thing, but I was also thinking um, they were trying to go to locations as well for, I mean, obvious spy reasons. If you think about what spies do,
Yeah.
they want to know, technology and stuff. So,
Oh,
um,
an interesting thing that to add in here while you're talking about this, because that's remote viewing basically.
mhm.
Sherry, tell them about the thing you got, the certificate for completing the course.
Oh, okay, wait, let's see. All right. Where is it? Okay, yeah,
This is a trip.
this is my graduation from Gateway,
Hmm.
and it is signed by Nancy McMonigal, and her husband Joe was a remote viewer in the army.
Okay.
So
Okay.
they're connected. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So those are those the things that you showed me, are those available, or can I get
Those
my
are from the
That's what
Monroe Institute,
they
right?
gave those to me in my handout in my book, like
okay.
my folder.
Yeah.
Damn, my little folder from the Monroe Institute, and it's got all that stuff in it. And
But
but
I can send you JPEGs of it so you'll have it.
yeah,
But let's go through that really fast, and just
can,
because I think it's interesting to
I
look at
was
the
thinking I
focus
could
levels.
read it real quick. It
Yeah,
won't
let's
be
do
too
that.
long. It's so cool. Okay,
Let
Okay.
me. I'll pull it up here and. Okay, yeah, let's do this so we can get an idea because some of them are combined.
focus one is a state where one is awake in the here and now in this physical space-time reality. Focus 10, that's where you start to go out of body and stuff, is mind awake, body asleep, a state of consciousness where the physical body is asleep and the mind is awake and alert. Consciousness is fully retained without dependence upon signals from the physical body. One learns to ride the edge of sleep. That's what you have to do to pull all this off. Okay, focus 11, the access channel, a state that gives you access to our total self, where we can send and receive beneficial information for our everyday use, usually incorporates a function command for future use in daily living. Focus 12 is expanded awareness. This is a state where conscious awareness is expanded beyond the limits of the five physical senses. Focus 12 has many different facets, including exploring non physical realities, decision making, problem solving, and enhanced creative expression. Focus 15, no time. This state has dual nature. One experience is a vast blackness, the void. And I've experienced that too. Extends, whoa.
Sorry.
Wait, where am I at? Uh,
The void, right
okay.
here.
A sense of one pointedness. A second aspect is quite active, allowing one to explore a sense of timelessness, all potentiality and creation of patterns on levels beyond time and space. Focus 18 is the heart level, a state where we can experience the unconditional love vibration within ourselves and access this in our daily lives as we interact with others. Focus 21 is the bridge state. This state of consciousness provides a bridge between the physical and non physical realms where access to non physical energies, intelligences is possible, a state where greatly expanded awareness is facilitated. Focus 22, the here and there, like Alice in Wonderland. The locale in consciousness where we find those perhaps still physically alive who are at an unconscious state. These include people in comas, drug induced states, or who are dreaming. And I'm going to add to that that I've pretty much proven to myself those with dementia. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
as a nurse. Okay, focus 23, the new goners. This locale is where where human inhabitants tend to be who are no longer physically alive and have become stuck for one reason or another. Often they're confused about or unaware of their death. Many attempt to maintain contact with the physical world around familiar people or places.
So ghosts.
Focus 24, 25, and 26. These are like some of my favorites. These are called consensus realities. These are areas that contain the afterlife expressions of spiritual traditions of human history. Inhabitants of a specific territory are in contact with others who share their beliefs. Free will choices here are restricted to only those compatible with the prevailing beliefs. This is where you have your Christian heaven, your Buddha heaven,
Or
those
hell, even, right? If you got an
right.
idea of hell and you think you're deserving of it, you might go to this
They do
place that
have
other people,
many,
right?
many. They have thousands of realms. In fact, that's something else I need to tell him about this. He was talking about sacred geometry and like I know about these entrant points. Okay, wait. Okay, wait. Focus 27, the park, an afterlife area created by humans who often resembling physical Earth environments. Many people inhabiting Focus 27 provide assistance to new arrivals in their adjustments to living in the afterlife. It's a highly organized and structured area. There are centers of activity here providing for the needs of human beings in their continuing development in the afterlife, such as education, life review, healing, and regeneration, planning, and many others. Focus 34 and 35, the gathering. This is in Bob's book about. about like the UFOs parked around watching. Okay, for our journeys. It's a state which allows communication with intelligences gathered to observe the happenings on Earth. In addition, this state facilitates the gathering of aspects of the total I there. Focus 42. State of consciousness which allows awareness of the larger I there cluster and recognition reclaiming of even more aspects of the self. This state is often used for galactic exploration as well as expanded memory and integration of the multidimensional self. And 49, lastly, the state described by Bob as an infinite sea of bonded I there clusters. It provides access to higher order guidance, the cluster council. It supports more expanded intergalactic multidimensional exploration, cosmic consciousness, and self knowing.
Wow. That's
Yes, wow.
crazy how they got all this information. Like, that's just, it's
From
mind blowing. What do
experience.
you think, SMQ? It's pretty crazy, isn't it?
Yeah, I would love to get a hold of those documents. Yeah, this only goes to the CIA document only goes to Focus 21. So this is
Mind
yeah,
blowing stuff. Yeah, I
So
can
glad I
definitely
wanted to
send
give
it.
you
And
something that would help you that you'd like. So I'm so happy about that.
yeah, no, this is I don't know what to say again. It's sort of like when I read the document. I don't yeah, if you could send that over, that'd be wonderful. I'd like to look at that. I'm probably gonna have to go there and check this out because it's not that far, but it's just too much. I mean, there's just too much here, and it really applies to well, what I'm trying to understand. Because the Mandela effect is real. So I just
it's research, you know?
Oh,
it
you know
is.
what? Real quick, let me tell you about this friend I have that he this is just really kind of back some of your stuff. A quick story, okay? When he was young, he had a babysitter and he had the opportunity, he was like 12, to like be with her, and he didn't. So he wanted to, once he got good at out of body, like go back in time and like, act upon that. So he
Mhm.
dropped into it to where he's like, he doesn't know it's him. He got rid of his memory of now and went back into it like he was really there, and he acted upon it and did it. And then some things changed in his life, but they were small, but they were changed.
Mm.
So there's that.
Okay, so there is ramifications to this clicking out, and this could be what they're talking about with the patterning, and that's what I'm talking about. Is this patterning that they bring up is this you can't change very much. You really on page 20. Well, you it's not you. I'm sure you probably know you can't change very much when you're clicking out like that, or you're in an altered state. Because if you do that, there is going to be ramifications, and they even talk about in the document if you stretch yourself too far out in these states, and they just go to focus 21, you can dislocate yourself completely from your physical existence. There
I wonder
is
if that's
danger.
why they called that movie Click. Click.
Mm.
I'm
Okay.
sorry.
No, 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 no. Is there a movie about this?
Well, there's a
No,
movie
no,
about
no.
Click, which is about a remote control where he was skipping through his life or going back or fast
Yeah, yeah.
forward.
With Adam Sandler. Yeah, I often refer to that because it seems like sometimes people are on autopilot and it's
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm-hmm.
this whole idea of NPCs or whatever, but it's
Mm-hmm.
it's more
Mm-hmm.
like maybe they're
Yeah,
just
yeah.
not all their consciousness isn't always there. Maybe it gets taken away or they're doing other things and their body's sort of left running the matrix. There on page 20 though there was something you were going to read. What part was this again?
Oh, I forgot now.
Consciousness and
Oh, I'm
perspective.
sorry. Oh,
A lot of my stuff seems obsolete now.
well, I'm gonna tell him. I'll tell him this real
You
quick.
blew his mind, Sherry.
While I
That's
was at
awesome.
the Monroe Institute, there was my favorite meditation that we were gonna do, and I was so excited about this particular one. And when we went in it, like I fell asleep, and I never fall asleep in any of them. I never did. And so I was so upset about it that they were so nice that all of the 24 people that were with me, or 23, and the teachers let us do it again. And I fell asleep at the exact same time again. And then it happened again. They did it one more time for me. And they told me at that time, you probably weren't falling asleep. You probably were clicking out, and you were probably doing something you were supposed to do, or some kind of work that you don't even know about or whatever. But that's what they thought was happening to me, because it was the exact same point at the beginning of the meditation.
It's amazing. Yeah. Yeah, that totally sounds like you were clicking out. You absolutely, the way they describe it in this document, it sounds like you were clicking out. Yeah, no doubt.
Yeah,
And
and
they
I'll,
put
I'll just add during her BQH, there was evidence of her doing things in her sleep time that would, I guess, fit into this, what we're considering to be clicking out into some other realm and doing the important work she does in her sleep time. So that's, she's able to go into that somnambulistic level in her hypnosis sessions,
Mhm.
which is really unusual for someone to go that deep. But she's able to get there, and yeah, it's really wild. So.
Well, I can tell you since it was actually the build up to this document. Now that I think about this, and you guys were talking about this, I would have. I thought they were these dreams where I would drift off and I would have conversations with a person or with people, and then I would come back, and it was like the strangest thing because I really wasn't. I don't know if it was sleeping. It was not like I don't. I know what it feels like to fall asleep. I know what that feels like, and this didn't feel like that. But I had entire conversations and with people, and I can almost, in my mind's eye, I can still see who I was talking to, and it's a very odd experience because I don't even think I was in the room I was in at the time, and yet I would come back and I would be there, and it was sort of like a dream, but not but it was constructed like coherently. You know how some most dreams are really kind of incoherent. And then finally I met Buster 1978 who gave me all the documents, and we've been researching this since, and he's just started on um the this, and I don't know. I don't know. It's very strange that you mentioned that. And then months before the document, once I was headlong into the Mandela effect, it was in the middle of the night, and I had gotten up in the middle of the night, and I was wide awake, and I knew I was wide awake, and out of nowhere, I heard, and I did a video on this. I heard someone say, "Hey, man," and it was almost as if it was a very casual kind of like, I don't know what it was. It was so casual and so strange, and it just said and and I didn't answer because I knew that if I had heard if I'd answered that it would have, escalated. So I went to sleep because I didn't feel like well, 1, I was too tired to talk, but also 2, I didn't want to do any kind of escalation, and it's so strange that all of these things happened before I got the document, and since the document,
It's all make more
nothing
sense, right?
makes perfect sense. It's
Yeah.
making perfect, and then what you were talking about with the institute and what you were your processes, it sort of sounds like that, but I'm not part of the Monroe Institute, and I've never been there. I don't know other than other than you. I don't know anybody who is part of it or has anything to do with it. So I I don't know. I don't
So you
know.
didn't
It's
seem like
very
a lab rat when you went there, right, Sherry? I mean, it seemed like it was
no,
just
they have
very.
like these little check units, and I had a roommate there that would she came, and I love her so much. She would go out of the body every night and hang out with her mom who had dementia that was still alive, but her father was taking care of her because she was bedbound. She just wasn't there anymore. But her soul had already left her body. My friend would hang out with her on the other side, and they would do fun things and everything.
So she was actually laying there, not in her body, but like her body, I guess the physical vessel that we call our body was being kept alive, or hadn't quite died yet. But what makes us human and the consciousness that is in the body wasn't in her body. So she's just
Right.
laying there breathing normal responses, I guess, to just regular stuff. But her body's out, and her daughter was able to leave her body in sleep time, and they'd hang
Yeah,
out.
every night. Yeah.
That's wild. That's wild stuff. And
Mhm.
that goes right along with this document too, right? SMQ. Sounds
And
like it.
yeah,
Robert,
yeah.
Robert Bruce goes out of body and visits his mom in the afterlife all the time too.
But it's interesting that she wasn't even quite dead yet, but yet
No,
she was still in this realm. I mean, we've heard about ghosts and the afterlife and things like that, but here she is leaving her body, and she isn't even quite dead yet. You know.
Well, and the document does go over that everything that we're talking about here. The document does touch on those things, and it's I was comfortable because it was a very kind of clinical reading of things with and I'm glad that it was presented to me in this way rather than any other format because it was something that I was used to and comfortable with. And Sherry, I got to ask you, did you have, um, you know, building up before you went there, did you have any kind of like, I don't know, anything specific that you remember? But you're sort of inclined anyway. You're gifted anyway, right?
Hmm. I don't know if it's gifted. I've always had experiences. If they, if you ever get bored, there's a video that I did. That was how that I kind of first met Shane. Was I've had a lot of experiences with Michael Jackson, and I was not a fan of his at all. I was like a Def Leppard person. I didn't even know it, but maybe
Okay.
like 5 or 6 of his songs, and I
Hmm.
still have communication with him at times. And he is the one that like led me to my like what I call my mission. And like when I've done it, I've had like some spiritual type attacks and stuff, but I still do it because that's what I believe in.
Hmm.
And I've had communication just with all. The only voice that I'd ever heard was that of Eric Medus, which is a kid that committed suicide, and his mom's a doctor, and they have a video blog, whatever it is called, channeling Eric. And I've actually had communication with Eric where I actually heard his voice, got a download of what he was telling me. He was actually defending my son. I don't know if you want the whole story, but I was
Well, I
just mad
mean, even
at my son. Uh,
recently, your friend's ex husband died, and you guys discovered his body when you got back from that trip in Austin at New Year's. I mean, this was just really recently, and
right.
he was able to tell her things to tell his wife, his ex wife. She was able to actually channel. She heard his voice and was, or I don't know, connected somehow. So yeah, she's got these abilities. I just don't know. It
I
seems
didn't hear
almost like
his voice.
Robert.
I would just get like a download. The only voice I ever heard was Eric's,
Okay,
except for I've heard Michael's voice before.
but
You
you're
know, the very
connected, is what I'm getting at.
person.
So I mean, it's and Robert Monroe must have known this for him to get you into his program at the Monroe Institute. So I guess what you're asking, leading up to that, was she having experiences, or did they happen after that? Is that what you're trying to get at, SMQ?
I
Yeah,
have
that's
experiences before, like with out of body stuff. The very first thing that ever happened to me was my nephew had came up to me and told me he was having out of body experiences. And so I was very Baptist right then. I was like, oh my gosh, he's going to go to hell. And then I started looking in the Bible and I started finding scriptures that backed up that these people were all in altered states of consciousness when they were having these visions.
mhm.
And then I started getting interested in it, and I learned about, like Robert Monroe, Albert Taylor, who actually he used to work for like NASA and stuff, and worked on like Stargate, and he's an out of body experiencer. He wrote the book Soul Traveler. I love him. And then and then as I started reading it, studying it, and practicing, I started having some experiences, and I did want to go to the Monroe Institute, but I just never thought I would. And then it was like gifted to me, and I got to go.
Okay.
Strange. Yeah, that's strange. Synchronicity. So I mean, your son thinks, he's like, "What the heck? Why are they paying you to for you to go
Yeah,
to this thing?" But you felt like you manifested it some kind of way,
right.
right? Because you already wanted to go. I
Yeah.
mean, that's wild.
Hmm.
Yeah, I believe it. I mean, after reading this document, I don't, I think manifestation, and particularly if there are individuals outside of this space time, as they put it in the document, there's a lot of goings on, and that which you've, Sherry, you've alluded to that happen, and these forces, whether they're non-human or human, they who knows how far they've gone since 1983 is the point I'm getting at ultimately, and we have no idea what's going on in these places. And I just have this distinct feeling that everything that people are wondering about in terms of orbs or disembodied voices or the Mandela effect or whatever it may be, it's all of it is tied to this, and all of it is tied to the way in which this works. And I almost feel as if Um, I don't know now. These experiences that I had, they were almost like interviews or something. I don't know. I don't know. It sounds. I don't know. I
But
don't
it
know.
definitely recognizes that there's more going on than the humans. I mean, there's other entities around, whatever you
Yes.
might want to call them, but it could be, from ghosts to orbs to, spiritual entities, angels, and things like that. I mean, there might be an overlap of titles, but on some level, there's still definitely more going on than what we typically think of,
I
you
found
know.
myself in classes and stuff, and at night, and I've also had meetings like what you're talking about with actually I know this sounds crazy, but I have these meetings that I don't remember what's said with Prince and two other guys that I don't recognize.
Hmm.
Do you remember what's said in when you're having these meetings, SMQ, or is it a blur to you?
It's a blur, but I know I came back. I wasn't emotional or upset, and when they first started happening, I thought it was just a dream. But I realized that it was too the way it was constructed. It obviously wasn't. But I didn't have any frame of reference at that point. I had had some odd things happen to me throughout my life. Very strange and odd and peculiar things throughout the entirety of my life. So I was not entirely shocked that this was happening to me. However, something so structured and almost casual, nothing like that. It was usually something traumatic or something very big would happen. And this wasn't like that. This was very calm, very like I said, casual is the best way I can put it. Like we're having this conversation, and I would come back here, and it was like it was very strange. It was just I wasn't emotional about it, or I don't know. I don't know.
It's
It
more
was
like a
just,
discussion
it
that you
was
just
more
don't
like a
remember.
discussion. Absolutely, exactly,
See, and
exactly.
I've had some where it's like we're training to fly above a swimming pool, and it just doesn't seem like the normal dream. It seems like something real or something. I want to get to a question in the chat before we get too far away from what we were talking about. Eileen was saying some recommend grounding cords and psychic protection, but isn't necessary because clicking out is the safety mechanism, right? That's a question she had because she goes on to say the Monroe Institute article said it was safe to practice it, but the CIA says only those with their training are safe. So
Hmm.
just to maybe scare people from trying it, you think? Or do you think? I don't know. What do you guys think about that?
Well, I mean, Sherry has the most experience. I've only read. I mean, she even has documents that have, knocked me off my center. So I don't know.
And, Sherry, this was when you went to the Monroe Institute, Sherry. When was that? Sherry, are you there?
Uh
Did she click out on us?
oh.
I think she's frozen.
Oh, okay.
Maybe she can hop back in. So, okay. So, what do you think about the protection and stuff? Do you feel like it's a dangerous place, or do you feel like, I
Well,
can see them inserting that before they released it, just to, dissuade anyone from trying anything in the document.
yeah, I certainly could see that the CIA doing that, but I think the distance of time too, in a way, is kind of a safety buffer, and that's the feeling I have. But if that's Eileen with Eileen Colts, who
Mm-hmm.
okay,
Yeah, it
then
is.
she's gone farther into this. I've only studied what are in the documents. I haven't actually tried any of the exercises or processes, and certainly I'll have to, read further into it. But I'm just, for me, it was all about understanding the nature of reality in relation to the paranormal and the Mandela effect. But I would be interested in doing exercises like this. That's for sure.
Mm. Yeah, she says her computer crashed. She'll be right back on the phone. Okay.
Okay. Okay.
So, okay, so she was talking about you discovered some Mandela effects from Asia or something. Was she saying? Uh,
Asia.
is that not what she
Well,
was saying?
well,
Well, she was.
for a while we were doing World War II ones that were very interesting, and a lot of people have this, well, I guess now it's a misconception about World War II and mainland America, or at least being in, well, it wasn't mainland, but Pearl Harbor being the only place that was attacked in World War II.
Yeah.
And during some of our Mandela research, we found that indeed California, Oregon was bombed. Washington State has been bombed. And the place above it's right above Santa Barbara. It's a small town above Santa Barbara that was shelled. But the heaviest shelling, I think, took place in Washington and in Oregon in this timeline. And also Japan held for at least a couple of weeks some of the islands in Alaska.
Hmm.
Also, to Britain, they lost Singapore, and as Winston Churchill said, it was I'm paraphrasing. It's one of the most humiliating naval defeats in all of the British Empire's history. So that's what's happened in this timeline, and Japan was such a power in the Pacific in this timeline that and I'm only using timeline because it's the only language I have,
Oh
but
yeah, I agree. It's helpful to
right.
use it for terminology, but the
Mhm.
idea most people have with it, I don't think is very helpful with trying to dissect this whole thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So they actually attacked and had taken over so much of, I believe it's Papua New Guinea, which is, I don't know if it's actually part of I don't know if that's part of the other chain of islands there, but it's just above Australia. But they had one of the largest death marches of POWs, and we're talking about somewhere on the order of 280,000 Australian and Allied forces POWs, including like Vietnamese, Chinese, Australian forces that were marched. 280,000. And I think some Canadian Americans may have been mixed in there. I'm not entirely sure. The point is, they were allies, and uh, it was a massive POW coup for them. Also, too, there's the Battle of Darwin now, where you had Axis forces actually attacking Darwin. So we had mainstream Australia or mainland Australia actually fighting for its life from the Axis forces, the Japanese forces in the Pacific. And there were some folks from Canada that were saying that when we stormed the beaches in Normandy, that in this timeline now there were Australians actually removed from us storming the beaches, because now in this timeline they're fighting to keep their country, their very existence now, rather
Hmm.
than having a large presence in Normandy. So
A
for a
lot more
while,
going on. That's crazy.
it got to the point where before we even had this Monroe Institute document, the CIA document, I was talking to my other researchers, and we were thinking, we should stop doing this just in case. Not saying that we had that kind of power or that kind of ego, but we were saying, what if and I had always talked about Anatoly Fomenko. He wrote this series of books, and every time, and it's called the New Chronology Movement. And he's a Russian mathematician, and he did this series of books where he goes back and he goes to try to find the source material for all of Western civilization. And eventually it just goes back to about three or four different authors, all of Western civilization. And the New Chronology Movement holds that there's about 1,000-year gap that's missing inside of Western civilization. And he contends, because he's a Russian, he's not a Westerner, that it was all made up, and that it was made up for to kind of more or less um, make Christendom seem more formidable force, give it sort of that antique power, that you kind of have if think about it. If you have a family that has money for one generation, or a family that has money for 1,000 years, you're going to think, wow, old money. And there's a more pristineness to that. And that's what he was kind of contending with the West, is that it invented 1,000 years, and by inventing that 1,000 years, it's able to cover up who knows what. But What I was worried about is the same thing he was contending with, was when you look close into history, it sort of dissolves like it's water in your hands. It falls, and you finally find out that there's no real lock on history, and that if you go back to source material and documents days later, they change. They physically change and can change.
And
And
look as if they've always been that way. That's
yes.
the supernatural thing that you observe. It's like, what the heck? It looks like it's always been that way. You can find super old documents, and getting back to what you're talking about with some of these earlier wars, I've been seeing photos that were like impossible to exist before. Photos and video footage that are much further back. I think Lone Eagles covered quite a bit of this, like tech before its time type
Hmm.
idea,
Hmm.
where there's like footage and photos that didn't exist before, and it's like, what's going on with this? And that kind of ties in with the whole JFK incident, where it's now in color. The film looks much better than it used to be black and white. So it's like almost like color film was invented before, and
Hmm.
then
Hmm.
before, what I remember it being originally. And it's like everything's sort of progressed a little bit quicker, and you can really see how manipulating a few little things back in time could make these little alterations.
Absolutely. And going back to the JFK thing real quick, I have a video out there. They've released in the Warren Commission, apparently, that indeed there was a second shooter, by the way, in case you didn't know.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
That's news to me.
yeah, it was news to me too, and I have a whole video on it, and it was really funny. It got up to like 70,000 views, and it was exploding. And at the time, I had a lot of things going on, but YouTube, they stopped the video because it got to 70,000. It stopped, and then I would say 2 or 3 weeks of that, they demonetized me. Now, I don't know if it was that video specifically, or it was me doing my nod to the We Died in 2012 series, or what, but it was it was a lot of strangeness going on there. But yeah, second shooter. So there you go.
That's wild. Yeah,
Hello.
they never would have. In fact, I just watched I think it was, who was the original? I'm trying. He's
Hey.
back!
I'm
Yay!
back.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Walter Cronkite, I believe it. Cronkite. Sorry, he
Mm-hmm.
was the guy that was on the air when it happened and everything. And then I saw like an interview of him like 20 or 30 years later, and he was. They were asking him about that. Well, do you think there's another shooter? And he was talking about that. So I need to pull out that clip, because according to what he was saying, that he just tended to go with the original one shooter thing that the Warren Commission said. So that's not even true anymore. So there we have some great
No.
residue of the way it used to be from, the guy that was on the news, announcing it back then. You know.
Well, before, right when the CIA document shook everything up for me, we were getting so much Ed McMahon, of all things. We had so much residue, and I still have so much Ed McMahon residue, including the famous Ed McMahon handing Johnny Carson a check for $1 million from Publishers Clearinghouse, right down to Ed McMahon doing a rap about him giving out the checks. And it's it was
That's a
get
trip. For those who don't know, in this current reality we exist in, Ed McMahon never worked for Publishers Clearinghouse at all, right?
correct.
Supposedly. Yeah. So I mean, that was the Publishers Clearinghouse was the only company like that I'd even heard of. I supposedly he's worked for this other company that did what Publishers Clearinghouse did, that no one's ever heard of. You know what I mean? It makes no sense
Mm-hmm.
whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So along with that and the second shooter, we were really on a roll, and then finally the CIA document hit, and I haven't really, I haven't been the same since. So all the way up to this conversation, which has obviously changed my entire paradigm once again. So there you go.
So yeah, man, that would be cool for you to go to the Monroe Institute and experience what they have to offer, and then come back
Mm-hmm.
and report back what you felt like, doing
Mm-hmm.
that, because it sounds like, from what Sherry was explaining with her experiences there, they take you through all these different processes. Can you tell just one of the things you did there, Sherry, is kind of an idea of like a day at the Monroe Institute?
Well, you get there and you like meet everybody, and it's really weird because everyone that you meet looks like someone that you know. Like there was someone that looked like my brother. My roommate looked like this girl Peggy I went to high school with. It's like sometimes the ages are different. Like they seem way older. Like if you pictured my friend elderly, that was her. And it was like we all felt like we knew each other, and it was really weird. And
Everyone experienced this.
it seemed like they knew that was going to
That's
happen.
weird. That's
You
weird.
know,
And I've had that happen too a lot lately too, where it seems like people just seem really familiar to me
but it
since
was
I started this
everyone.
channel.
It was
Yeah.
like every one of them, and so we all felt like we knew each other right away. And then they start, and they just start like teaching, the different focus levels and all that. And then you'll go into meditation, and you go in your check room, and they always say by way of the bathroom because you have to go to the bathroom first so you'll be comfortable. And then you do the you go in your check unit. It's like a kind of like a deprivation type unit. And
What do you mean? It's
put
like
on
soundproof and
well,
dark
really,
or
because it's got like a little curtain and everything, but you're gonna have on the headphones and everything
okay.
with the binaural beats. And then Robert Monroe's voice is on there, and he talks you through it. And I know at one point they were talking about upgrading it and changing the voice, and I like voted against that because it's Robert Monroe's place, and I don't want his stuff to leave it. But anyway, and then you'll go back out and meet and share everything, like experiences that you had and stuff. And then you just keep doing it, and you keep doing it. You might do it like 6, 7, 10 times a day
And you're
while you're
trying to
there
get out
for
of
a
your
week.
body, or what are you trying to do in these things?
Well, yeah, but they say don't, that doesn't have to be the goal, because any experience in there is really cool. Just like, one time I was in an experience, I was having an experience, and I like felt someone hold my hand, and then I was hearing that song that I'd never heard before called Hold My Hand, and it's actually by Michael Jackson and Akon, and I had never ever heard the song before. And then I had another experience when we were going to a higher focus level, and it was funny because in my vision, my head popped up like through a hole, and I could smell like leather baby shoes, and I knew that they were my brothers that died, Danny's, and I knew
Oh
that
wow.
I was around my brother. And they give you a notebook to write everything down in and stuff. And so I mean, I didn't actually go out of body while I was there, and they say that you might not, but it does help you to facilitate it like later when you're at home. But I had already had experiences like that too. So, but it's just an awesome experience because you have like-minded people and stuff. And the food's really good. It's like going on a cruise.
It's like an all-inclusive thing. So that
Yeah,
2,500 covers room, board,
right.
food, and
Everything.
everything, right?
Mhm.
So are you trying to achieve different focus levels, like the focus level that I mean, is that what the object of this is?
Right, and we only went up to like huh, it was below the afterlife realms in Gateway.
Did they
And
try to
then
get to 12? Was that? I'm trying to remember.
I don't remember. I think so. I think that was as high as it went. And like I said, that's the prerequisite before you go to the other ones. And I want to go back too, but I want to go to the out of body intensive with William Buhlman. That one doesn't require a prerequisite, and you can they just like slam it to where you usually you get out of body. And they have that one. He still uses the binaural beats and the check units and all that stuff. I was trying
Hmm.
to say what the check unit stood for. It's like controlled something, but I'm gonna
Hmm.
find it really quick while y'all talking.
So that sounds real interesting, though. That's like so each one of these things are like a week long and 2,500 bucks.
Yeah, and they're worth it.
Hmm.
Oh,
Sounds
uh,
interesting.
it does sound very, very interesting, and it would be interesting. And I guess I'll probably never find out how far the CIA actually got with this, because we're talking, that document obviously went just to Focus 21, and Sherry went well beyond that. So I wonder where exactly we are in terms of, because obviously the government's going to want to weaponize this, so, or to the point that they can weaponize this. And obviously, if we're experiencing the Mandela effect, and it's a disparate population that's experiencing the Mandela effect, then I think it's safe to say that something has changed in this version of reality. And the way in which they describe reality in this document, I still am kind of toying with that idea. At least the idea I can't shake, that indeed this particular hologram like this infinite hologram that can be broken and into pieces. I'm wondering, I still can't shake it if we're one of those pieces or nodes that they're kind of toying with, perhaps. And I don't know. It's
Well, what
just
do you think
something.
about what do you think when have you looked into like the meaning with any of the changes? Because one of the things I noticed when I started looking into the changes, really the JFK one was the one that puzzles me. But when you look at something like Fruit Loops, you know, it's like there's no fruit in Fruit Loops, so it changed to be a word that sounds like fruit, you know, but it's not really fruit. And it seems to be this revelation of truth with a lot of the changes. So you know, whether it's that one, the Looney Tunes, you know, you think about our frequencies are kind of jacked up right now, and it's not talking about cartoons anymore. It's talking about frequencies, as in tunes, you know, and you can go down
Mhm.
the list and you can kind of see this, and then the merging of realities with the way letters are merging together. Dolly really not needing braces or braces disappear, and on, you know, this whole thing. And then the whole thing with the ET home phone, like homophone, and it's like it seems as if what I'm getting at is that it seems like this reality has been hacked from the outside of it, you know. So if you can imagine the Sims game and the developer outside of it, he's not really a player, but he's able to manipulate something, and it appears that it's always been that way. But us within the matrix, we also have this power of intention, and that's what this document gets into about how we can make changes within this reality. Or Cynthia Sue Larson talking about quantum jumping and making changes. So could we be looking at two different things going on here?
I think I have the idea of, I think there's this idea that it's a beta test. Like some of the earlier rollouts, like Fruit Loops and Hollywood and all these things are a beta test. And for when we were doing our World War II research, we were worried that perhaps you had the beta test and then the real stuff was starting to roll out. But we pulled back from the research and then it seemed to have gone away. Um, so, it could be some, and a lot of it is, like you pointed out, a lot of it has to do with language and the use of language. But
Mm-hmm.
if you think about it, language is seems to be the
What
thing that
is
kind of, right, it holds it all together. And language is the thing. You see, the way I look at it is first you have to have language, and then what you do is you have to have fiction. And then what you do is fiction is what preps the person for what's coming, and then that's how you're able to introduce technology. And one of the things I like to point out is, you want to talk about, triumph of the will or something like that, something very Nietzschean, with that idea. If you talk about Jack Parsons, he was a Thelemite in the early 1930s, and he worked directly with Aleister Crowley. And what he tried to do was, he had a great interest in science fiction, so you had the fiction, and then the fiction introduced him into the idea of the rocket. At the idea of the rocket was fiction. It didn't exist. He, through his science, his math, and his will and his occult practices, he willed that into existence. And he forever changed this reality. Now, and I started to look at that pattern, and that's how it always happens. You first have the language, then the language forms this fiction, and the fiction first comes. And now we call it predictive programming. And then you have the predictive programming, and it preps people. It gives them a linguistic understanding, so they're not fearful for the changes that are going to come to this reality. And I think for me, that was the real breakthrough that I started to understand, and how exactly technology is advanced in this reality. It starts with language, and then from language it moves to fiction. From fiction it moves to reality. Now,
So
I've
with the
often.
predictive programming, that's almost like they're trying to harness the power of the masses to be in fear about a certain thing that they would like to bring about at some point.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, and the document talks, and this goes back to the patterning that they're talking about on the
Mm-hmm.
mass scale. Is everyone sort of has to be in tune. We're all like members who have to play in this huge band, this huge symphony, and we all have to be in tune. And you're on one side of the spectrum, or you're on the other side of the spectrum, and
Mm-hmm.
everybody in between still has to be within that window. And that's what this document talks about. And that's and the best way to do that is through language and through fiction. And I found the section here finally. It's on page 8, if you don't mind, if you're cool with that, and I can
Oh,
read it.
definitely. Yeah, let's do it.
Okay, cool. And it's section 13. It says part encodes the whole. And I wrote my notes here about the Mandela effect and peer-to-peer aspect of the blockchain. It says here, of further importance is the fact that even if we dropped our frozen hologram of the ripple pattern on the floor and it broke into a number of pieces, each individual piece would recreate the entire holographic image all by itself. The smaller the piece, the fuzzier and more distorted would be the resulting holographic projection. But the fact remains that the whole projection would nonetheless be made. So there it is. So that could explain a lot.
I have something neat to say really quick. I know when I was at the Monroe Institute, we did a meditation like to create something, and so like when I was in there, I was picturing a car, and I was picturing it just happened to be white, and like when I came home, you know, it had flooded the Louisiana flood of 2016. I lost my car, and I ended up getting a white one that was like a $30,000 car for like 14,000. And all of a sudden, I was sitting in there realizing that that was the one I had pictured there. But William Buhlman has an interview where he talks about it's one on YouTube, and it's creating from the out of body state. It you know, it kind of talks about that. Like he went out of body and saw his fireplace like in ghost form, and that he had already picked out the stuff to that they were gonna make that fireplace. They knew it was coming. It was kind of on back order. The workers were busy and all that, but he could see it in the out of body state already forming in this reality.
And that goes back to the whole timeless thing that SMQ
Right.
was talking
And,
about.
but and one other thing I wanted to tell him, I was taking a little note, was that I thought it was interesting how he was talking about energy keeps the hologram together. And you got to figure like all the ley lines. You've got like things like stadiums where people play sports and stuff on these ley line where they meet and stuff. And you know, there's all that. I don't know if you saw the movie Monsters Inc. They powered the city by the fear of children, like their screams. They bottled it for the electricity.
Yeah.
And I just think it's so pertinent to this. And I was just hoping to maybe give you a few little things to look at further, even though I don't know if would help you or not. But it's something that I've kind of come up with on my own. And then they figured out later that they could do it even so with like happiness. You know, it didn't have to be fear to create.
Yeah, because you think about a sporting event and it's a lot of emotion going there. You know, you got half the people rooting for them and they're excited. The other half are like angry or whatever. But all of that's putting out this tremendous amount of energy that we don't realize is really there. Even you know,
And
it's not
Disney
tangible.
Worlds is on them. The Disney Worlds are laid on the ley line.
Washington is, you
They
know,
will everything. A lot of pertinent things are, you know. But real
definitely.
quick, I wanted to say this, that I feel like, I mean, I just have to feel like, because I feel like I know Robert Monroe's signature energy. And I think that, you know, back in the day like that, people weren't afraid of like, or they didn't have any like doubts about their government. And if the military had approached him and said they were interested in his work, I think he would have felt honored and thought that that was
Patriotic, a
his
sense
work
of,
was worthwhile.
yeah, yeah,
You
I
know, so
could
I don't
totally see
think
that.
that he was like a negative person. I just wanted to point that out.
No, and I could see them playing on because you'll see it nowadays, you know, where like somebody's like picking up some stuff on their ham radio, and then and then they go to the government thinking there's someone they can trust, and then they say, "Hey, look what I've been picking up. It's like extraterrestrial signals or something." Like, well, what do you have? But it's really coming from them, and they just want to see what they have, and they play on that sense of patriotism. So I could totally see them doing something like that with him, with having the intent to try to weaponize his work or build upon it and then weaponize
Right.
it. So I don't necessarily think Robert Monroe was a bad dude. I
Oh,
just
I
think
just had to stick
they
up
were
for him real
interested
quick.
in what he was doing and trying to build off of it, you know?
Yeah, you know, and the last thing I was going to throw in before y'all start talking again, is just to see if it helps anything, was the check unit stood for Controlled Holistic Environmental Chamber. Okay,
Nice.
now y'all can move on.
But if you don't mind, that chamber you're talking about, is that was that a physical, like a physical chamber?
Actually, it's just like in each room, there's like two beds on each side. There's YouTube videos that where people that have been at the
Oh,
Monroe
okay.
Institute show it, but it's just like a
Okay.
little bunk bed all built in with a black curtain. And when you lay in there, there's a speaker in there that you plug in your headphones into, and there's like disco lights in there.
That
Okay.
sounds awesome.
It is awesome.
That is awesome.
So the lights are
Wow.
But they
designed to
do
put you
have
in a
a Faraday
trance.
cage there. I saw it in this when we took the tour, and this one special part where they have this Faraday cage in there, and it's like, I don't know, it's really cool. I think you can, I don't know.
I don't know. I've seen some remote viewers talk about there being some kind of Faraday cage type thing that they couldn't see beyond. So I'm sure they knew about that and what they knew how to shield their stuff,
It's
from the people
cool.
who are using these programs to remote view or do these types of things out of body, and then they create these barriers that work on the other focus levels, if you will. I don't know.
Yeah, I had just heard about the shielding with the Faraday cages from remote viewing. I just picked that up doing this kind of research. So it's there's so much to this
There
that
is. It's yeah. There's so much to it, man. It's like the
The
more you
Faraday
dig, the more you
cage,
find, and it's more
it has
puzzle pieces.
the Faraday cage room has like a round bed in it with like, I don't know, it looks like somewhere you'd go like have your honeymoon at or something. It's like dark and romantic in there with this big copper cage and this big round bed with the
You
like,
don't know what they used it for? Was it
no, I think you could go in there and like,
see if you can get through the
maybe
barrier?
you could go in there and have your, I can't remember how you did it. You had to maybe pay for it or something, and you could like do your experiences in there, maybe the meditations or something.
You think that could have been for one of the upper levels, like you're in the entry one. Maybe that was for
Maybe,
Starline or something else.
I don't. I'm not sure. I
That's
don't remember
interesting,
what they
though.
said. I wish I remember.
Yeah, that's interesting.
wow, wow. Mm,
I'd love to go there.
Me
Maybe I
too.
can start a.
We should all go together. That'd be
That'd
fun.
be crazy. That'd
that'd
be
be
crazy.
cool.
So you would get to go to another upper level though. We'd be stuck in this
Hmm.
old gateway stuff they've been dealing with for 36 years, right?
Yeah. Honestly, if I go again, I mean, I want to go to out of body intensive with William Buhlman. I
Can you
think
do that without the?
right. It doesn't require prerequisite.
Oh, okay, okay.
Okay.
That's good. Well, shoot, we are. How much time do you have, SMQ?
Well, how long do you guys usually go for?
We're right at about what we normally do, but come across any other Mandela effects recently or anything, or things shifting still for?
Well, we deal a lot with the Schumann resonance, and lately we've noticed that the Schumann resonance has I don't know if it's the actual. A lot of people have a lot of chatter about. I don't know if it's the Schumann resonance or the technology that's recording the Schumann resonance. There seems to be blackouts in it,
Yeah.
and yeah, okay, so you know
And
about that.
craziness too. Yeah. So yeah, you
Yeah.
don't know if the instrument needs to be recalibrated because sometimes it looks like that. It looks like it went haywire and they had to recalibrate it, or if it's
Hmm.
actual cosmic energy coming through and really doing something. I don't really know, but yeah, I've seen the anomalies as well, and it's really strange that you got these blackouts and everything. You know.
Also, too, you have to think about with tech, they've gone down a lot lately, like Facebook and Instagram and all of those things. So I'm wondering if
Gmail
somehow
too. I couldn't
Gmail.
believe that.
Hmm.
The other day
Hmm.
I couldn't send one. I thought it was mine. And someone's like, I'm trying to send you the file. It won't let me. I'm like, oh, Gmail's actually
Hmm.
glitching out right now and it wouldn't send anything.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't know if all of that's related, but I thought that was kind of interesting, and it's something that kind of it piqued my attention for a few hours, so I thought I'd throw that in there. But that's really where I'm at. I'm full on to this right now, and I'm talking to some other people with some other ideas as well. But I'm really into this right now and really pursuing this, and there's other documents too that I'm going to start getting into in the coming weeks and everything. So that's pretty much
Awesome.
where I'm at.
Awesome. Well, I want to tell everybody again that SMQ's link is down in the description below, so you can go check out his channel and follow his research
And
into
I'm gonna
this.
be watching everything to see, what you come up with and stuff. It's so interesting to
It's an
me.
exciting topic, man. I mean, and it seems like what you were just saying. It's like the more you dig, the more you find. There's more pieces to
Hmm.
put together, and it's more and more interesting all the time. I mean, you
Hmm.
just can't get enough of it. I know how it is. It's like the endless rabbit hole.
Also, SMQ. If you do type in William Buhlman, it's spelled Buhlman and hit interview. There is dozens of them that are every single one is amazing, and a few of them were actually like lectures at the Monroe Institute. Like every day, you might get a lecture of someone special,
Oh,
like Joe McMoneagle or William Buhlman or something.
thank you. I appreciate that. Just wrote that down, and I'll check that out. Thank you very much, Sherry.
Yeah, he has a book called Adventures in the Afterlife.
Okay.
And then he has is it Body and Soul? Wait, no, I don't want to mess those up. But then he has a new one called Higher Self Now or Destination Higher Self. I should
Okay.
be prepared on that because he has 3 books that I had read, and then he just came out with a new one.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh, wonderful. Well,
But
I appreciate
Adventures
it.
in the Afterlife was one of my favorites. Okay,
Well, that's awesome, man. I appreciate you coming on. Love to have you back sometime. We can discuss where you're at with the research because I know you'll have more that we can dive into. I mean, we could go for hours on this, I'm sure. But
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, yeah. I would love to come back and I appreciate Sherry reaching out to me and Shane. I appreciate both of you guys having me on, and I really enjoyed myself.
me
awesome,
too.
man. Yeah, I appreciate you. Thank you, Sherry, and thank you guys in the chat. And we'll see you on the next one. Have a good one. Peace.
Bye.
If you'd like to support the work I do, go to paypal.me/UOTF. Thanks.